Hello, and welcome to Thinking Boldly. This is the podcast series for the Concilium Institute. I am retired Judge Julie Field, and with me is my colleague and the co-founder of the Concilium Institute, attorney Heidi Webb. And we are very excited to take some time today to talk with Miriam Anzovin. Miriam, if I may call you by your first name,
Absolutely.
is a remarkable individual, and I'm just very, very excited for the conversation that we're going to have today. So thank you, Miriam, so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here with you both.
Yes, and let me tell the world a little bit about Miriam before we get started. So Miriam is a content creator and a huge Jewish nerd, self-described. She is a storyteller, an artist, and puts ancient discourse in direct communication with modern internet culture, pop culture, and current events. In the Daf Reactions Project, she shares her practice of daily study of the Babylonian Talmud in the Daf Yomi cycle from the viewpoint of a formerly Orthodox, now secular, millennial feminist. In Jewish lore reactions, she explores her favorite epic characters and stories from the incredible extended chain of imagination that is the collective narrative world building of the Jewish people. Her videos are her authentic reactions with commentary both heartfelt and comedic, centering Jewish joy. Miriam exists at the intersection of the Sefaria and Sephora. In her own words, she also exists rent-free in some people's minds. So, Miriam, we are just very excited to have you. And I will just note for the folks that are listening and that have been following Concilium Institute's Thinking Boldly podcast that Miriam and a prior guest that we had, who is Lisa Fishbane Jaffe, who talked with us about different and historical aspects of secular divorce and Jewish Orthodox divorce. So, Miriam, we want to hear about your life experience as well as the professional work that you do in sharing Jewish joy with the world. So, thank you so much for being part of our conversation today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I too am thrilled that you're here, thrilled that I met you earlier this year and had an opportunity to sort of like learn from you. And it was in such a joyful and unintimidating way for content that is deep and heavy and often many people don't understand it, Jewish or not. This language is can be convoluted. And I'll start just with the Sefaria to Sephora. I think you were making a reference to makeup and just sort of how you present. So I think that I think even that was like just one word. And then the Daf Yomi piece. If you could just start, and I want to get substantive, but I think it's important for people to even understand those two words and what you're saying. So why don't we start there and then we can jump into a deeper conversation.
So, Daf Yomi is the practice of learning the entire Babylonian Talmud, and I will explain what that is for folks who don't know in a hot second. The Babylonian Talmud is the oral Torah. Jews believe that we received the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, at Mount Sinai. That's what we read in synagogue every week. But in addition to that, there's a belief that there was an oral tradition of laws and practices that came down to us and was transmitted verbally one generation to the next. Until, unfortunately for everybody, the Roman Empire happened. Boo hiss, boo hiss. And in order for these teachings not to be lost because of Roman occupation and dispersing the Jewish people around the world, people had to write it down. These things that had been transmitted like this from teacher to disciple all of these years then had to be written down. And that's what's called the Mishnah, that was codified around, I want to say, the year 200 CE. And then there's something called the Gemara, and that is debate, discussion, and analysis of everything in the Mishnah. That is hundreds of voices talking over time and space. There's all these rabbinic interpreters and thinkers called the sages, and they discuss everything. They discuss what's in the Mishnah. They discuss what's in their real day-to-day lives. They talk about everything under the sun. Some things you wish they didn't talk about. Some things you were like, I'd like to hear more. So the Mishnah and the Gemara together, plus additional commentary added over centuries of time, that's what the Talmud is. I like to describe it, because I believe this is the best analogy, as ancient Babylonian rabbi read it. People have this mistaken idea like it's a book of laws, but it's not. It's not at all. It's a book of conversations. So you get to encounter this person's opinion, and you kind of understand why they're coming to that conclusion about how to do something Jewish, how to practice, what to believe, how to believe. And they have to bring sources from the Torah, from the Tanakh, to prove that why their interpretation or their take on it is correct. And somebody else is going to be like, nuh-uh, I don't believe that because this is my interpretation. They're going to bring their sources. And so really there's a lot of arguments, but they're considered to be arguments for the sake of heaven, trying to get to the thing that matters the most in the conversation. And just the nature of those discussions and arguments is, I think, what makes the Talmud so appealing to me, because there's usually not a right way.
Mm-hmm.
There is a variety of voices that are displayed here. It's a multivocal text over a lot of different time and a lot of different space. And that makes it really fascinating to those of us who are learning it right now in the current era. We get to sort of time travel back and see what was happening in these conversations as people figured out how to make Judaism, this religion and culture that had been focused in the land of Israel, which is now Israel/Palestine, that region, how they had made that religion into a portable religion, because thanks again, Rome, we had to, right? So they're trying to figure out stuff. We to this day are trying to figure out stuff. Sometimes it's the same stuff, and that's what makes it absolutely fascinating. The times that I'm like, wow, this is a really ancient idea, and I'm uncomfortable encountering it, are equal to the amount of times I'm like, wow, this is actually quite a modern idea that we're still talking about to this very day. So Daf Yomi, to get back to your question, is the practice of learning one double-sided page of the Talmud. There's two sides to every page, side A, side B, every single day. And everyone begins usually at the same day, and the whole process takes 7.5 years to complete. And right now, those of us who began in the new cycle, which began January 5th of 2020, we're, 5+5, almost 6 years in, which is absolutely mind-blowing to think about. So that's what Daf Yomi and the Talmud briefly are.
That's super helpful. Okay, so the Yomi's the day, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken, and the
absolutely.
Daf is the content.
Daf is
So
page.
is the
So
page.
it's
Okay,
page
so
a
the
day.
page,
Yeah.
so page a day. Basically, it's that's your daily take. And then what you have done, and sort of maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how this it occurred. I know during the pandemic that you sort
Yes.
of got into this, and um, I don't want to describe what that experience was like for you, but maybe you can describe it for us and why and how this sort of evolved into what it is today.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it does have to do with the pandemic, in my particular, what I do, because what I do now, this has been my life for the past almost 4 years, is I take what I'm learning that day, and I know there's something I want to talk about, and I want to tell people about, something I might be struggling with, something I find really fascinating, just something that really speaks to me. And so I talk about what that was. I react to the page of Talmud I've learned that day. I have this series called Daf Reactions. And really, that helps me kind of internalize what I'm learning. Because again, it's kind of very, very dense material often. And it can be very difficult to get through and process and keep in your mind. And so I decided to start filming myself doing this about 2 years into the pandemic. When I started learning Daf Yomi in this cycle, we all kind of started the same day, as I mentioned, and that's kind of the fun of it. We're all on the same page, no matter where you go in the world. Everybody's doing this same page. But as we know, the pandemic happened shortly thereafter, and so we had to use online tools to learn. learning with our chavruta, our study partners online through Zoom, using online tools, listening to podcasts about the daf. These were all really, really helpful things. And there was also this internet culture that had popped up around this. So people would share memes that they had made about that day's learning. They would write haikus. There's a whole bunch of ways that people were engaging in a very creative nature with what they were learning to help them retain the knowledge and make it theirs, really take ownership of this learning.
So was this something that like took off for a lot of people in a different way, the whole 7-year cycle thing during the pandemic? Like people got creative because they needed to, because they were isolated, or was this always sort of part of the allure or the way that people were learning this 7-year cycle?
This is a good question. I think that it's a relatively recent thing. I know in the last cycle, there have been people who tweeted back when it was still Twitter. They tweeted about the daf, right? It had been something that was growing as a way to encounter and engage with it, but really, and there were podcasts and things like that, but really the sort of irreverent, reverent nature of online funny discourse about the Talmud, which is something that I would describe my content as being, feels like it really got going with this cycle. I
Okay.
think perhaps it was because the nature, we were all online, so we all had to find ways of engaging with it like this. But it wasn't like there wasn't massive hype leading into the process. People who are coming off a 7.5-year stretch of learning, they were excited because it's a huge accomplishment. And I remember reading an article at the time, right when they had finished the previous cycle, the folks who had been doing it filled the MetLife Stadium. And it was like all these men in black hats with beards, right? But there was one guy dressed as Where's Waldo? And I absolutely love that. But the reason I decided to do Daf Yomi in the first place, let me just walk it back a second. I've had a very good Jewish education. I'm very lucky in that. But the Talmud was never something that I learned, in part because, to your point, it is kind of intimidating. It can sound very intimidating. I felt intimidated. I also didn't feel like maybe growing up, when I went to a sort of religious school, it wasn't necessarily something that was for women. It wasn't like, no, you can't do this, but it wasn't also a thing we were expected to do or encounter. There's
Okay.
a lot of that. Historically speaking, it has been a very male space. Very male space.
And to your point about the Reddit culture of the Talmud,
Yes.
I'm assuming that these are men who are having these conversations. And I don't know if they're
Primarily.
identified given names or not,
The
or
men?
yeah, in the
Oh, yeah. The men are always given names. I will say, because one of the teachings is to always cite who you're learning from. You attribute your teachings to your, I learned this from so-and-so, who heard it from so-and-so. And that's how they track where ideas come from and are able to compare notes about it. So the men get names. Rav Sheshet, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, whatever it happens to be. They get names. Sometimes women get names. And sometimes it's just so-and-so's wife, so-and-so's daughter. So something I like to do in the videos is, if they don't have a name, I give them one. For the purposes of the video, it's usually a woman I respect for some reason, and I just, I'm giving this unnamed woman a name. All of us have struggled to some degree with the inherent sexism of being in a text that is primarily male voices, and they're often talking about women, but no woman has a voice in those conversations. And so that can be really tough. But that's not to say women are not in the Talmud at all. They are. One of my favorites is Beruria. There's also Yalta. There's an incredible range of women who I greatly admire. And in fact, I learn primarily from female Talmud scholars today. So you just have to really make sure that those female characters, the unnamed ones especially, don't get just like left out there with no names. We have to think of them as real human beings, because they were.
Yeah.
So yes, it can be very difficult to spend all this time with male sages and their opinions. Sometimes you agree with them. Sometimes you're like, I will fight you in a parking lot over this hot take that you have. But that's why my videos are called Daf Reactions. These are my personal reactions to what I'm encountering. It's not just me trying to say verbatim what it is. It's like, what does it mean to me as a learner?
I love that. Bringing the conversation, sort of like shifting it a little bit to the voices women have in various places. And particularly as we talk about divorce and we talk
Yeah.
about courts and we talk
Yeah.
about places women's voices are or are not heard. Julie, as a judge, may certainly be able to chime in on some of this as well in a different way. But I know that we've had conversations before about your experience in court,
Yes.
both in rabbinical court and in civil court, probate court. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about that process and how this experience you've had may inform that.
To give a little background, I was raised in a Baal Teshuva family. That is a family that becomes more Orthodox Jewish over time. And so I was raised quite religious, I would say. And one of the things that eventually started to become untenable for me was when I learned about agunot. Agunot are women who are in dead marriages. They are stuck married to a man who won't give them a divorce, a Jewish divorce, thus not being able to move on with their lives because technically they're still married to their maybe ex-husband in civil court, but in religious court still considered to be their spouse. And when I learned about this, I was so disturbed. I was Orthodox at the time. I was in my late teens. This was when I was really kind of both very into Judaism. I loved it so much. I love it to this day so much. I mean, this is what I'm doing with my life. But it was a struggle. This was a real struggle. How could I believe in a religious system where women could never be on the courts that adjudicate divorce? How could I be part of something where the man is the only one who can initiate a divorce? This was very difficult. So this is part of the thing that began to pull me away from orthodoxy, is recognizing this sort of misogynistic structure within something that was really, really important. Like a lot of people talk about Jewish marriage, but not as many talk about Jewish divorce. I understand why. No one wants to, but it's really very important. So for a lot of different reasons, not this one particularly, but I had a loss of faith in my early 20s, and I kind of moved away from anything really that Jewish. And it was only through learning Talmud that I kind of came back to my own different new sense of Jewish identity. But during that time, my early 20s, I got married at the age of 24. I was no longer religious. I was, however, very young. And I will say for anyone who is listening to this and who is in their 20s, I just highly recommend not getting married in your 20s. I can't stress this enough. I know you think that this person is the one, and maybe you're right, but you could be wrong. And if you're wrong, that's a big pickle. So just like really think about it. Really, really, really think about it. Because once it's a lot easier to get into a marriage than it is to get out of that. Not just in Judaism, in civil court as well.
Right.
100%.
Absolutely. So I was married for 9 years, but I did not have a Jewish wedding, quote unquote, right? We had a chuppah, that's what the canopy that's over us, and we smashed the glass and all those things, but we had no ketubah, that's the written marriage document. And I had thought that because I didn't have a ketubah, well, I wouldn't need, if I ever was going to get divorced, I wouldn't need a get. That is the Jewish divorce document, a get. And then, life happens. Things go not like you planned. And it turns out you cannot remain married to that person for a lot of reasons. In my case, it was an abusive marriage. And it's to the point where I can't even really remember the person that I was during that marriage. It certainly wasn't this person who sits before you today having this conversation. I hadn't started learning Talmud. I hadn't done any of the things. I wasn't an online internet person at that point. I was a person who was deeply shy because my ex-husband would tell me that I was good at nothing and had no aspirations, had no dreams, had nothing. It was really a fresh start. Like I had to start from scratch. But when we separated, It was October of 2018. So it's October now. Yeah, okay.
Wow.
It's a very, very full circle moment.
Yeah, 7
We
years.
separated, and then my mom said to me, my mom, who is still an Orthodox woman, she said to me, what about going to the Beit Din? That's the Jewish court. What about getting a get? And I was like, I don't think I need one. I don't have a ketubah. And she pointed out to me that that was technically incorrect. And she's right. She was right. One does not need a ketubah to require a get in a Jewish divorce. Yes. Both myself and my husband were Jewish. So technically speaking, if I did not get a get, some people in our community would still consider us married. And there was no way in hell, no way in Gehenna, that's Jewish hell, that I was going to be linked with that man for the rest of my life. And I will say this, in America, it is quite different. We have separate legal systems for the secular and Jewish parts of life. But in Israel, for example, they do not have secular marriage and divorce. Each religious group, they have their own courts for those types of things. So technically speaking, while it may not matter here as much for people who are not Orthodox, it's a deep issue for people who are in the Orthodox community here in America. But in Israel, it doesn't matter if you are Orthodox or not. You still have to go through the Beit Din system, which is a big red flag to me. And that's why there's so many.
And if you have a Muslim divorce or Christian divorce, you
right,
go through
they go through their own.
Okay, they go through their own.
Exactly, which is sort of like a holdover from the Ottoman Empire situation. Yes, exactly. Right. So even though I was not Orthodox at that point during any of my marriage, actually, but certainly not during the divorce part, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. I don't want there to be anyone who finds me to be still connected to that person who I am still technically, quote unquote, in a sense, owned by, because I can't move on with the rest of my life. I want to be able, if someday I would remarry another Jewish person, I'd like to be able to do that. And I just wanted to be completely free in every sense. So I reached out to the local Beit Din here in Boston, where I live, and they were quite good. I will say that not every Beit Din is quite good. And for those who might be listening who are Jewish, I always want to recommend some resources to folks who might be going through this and may not know where to turn. There is a Yelp for Batei Din that you can go to. It's called RateMyBeitDin.com. I really encourage you to do this. I love the group that runs it. They have reviews for Batei Din, what you can expect, how do they treat the women in the scenario, how responsive are they, and they also offer training to Batei Din so they can get better in these areas, and you don't necessarily feel as bad in this process, or it's not dragged out as much as it could be. So if you're looking for a Beit Din, go there. Really recommend it. I also recommend the International Beit Din. They're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. So I went and I had a pretty okay experience. But before I went to the Beit Din, I went and got my civil divorce. That was the last time I saw my ex-husband in person. And as part of the agreement, the judge told him, okay, within 30 days, you should appear in front of the Beit Din so you can start her religious divorce process. And that's exactly what happened. I was in communication with the Beit Din and my lawyer, so I put those two together so they can make sure to craft the language in such a way that it made sense for civil court and would make sure that he took the step of going to religious court to grant me my get.
So it was the onus was on him to do that. You couldn't.
Yes.
Again.
I couldn't. I couldn't, even if I couldn't. There was no way for me as a woman to be like, I'm giving you a get.
Right.
You're right.
That was off the question. That was off the table. Really, he needed to start the process. And actually, the actual ritual itself reflects this. So when I went, I requested for a representative to be him instead of him be there in person because I don't want to see
that's
them,
good.
Which is an option. And I,
took it.
If you are in a bad marriage where it's not, going well, and for a lot of reasons you don't want to be in the same physical space as the person you're getting divorced from, I would recommend looking into that. So the person representing my ex-husband was there. The get had already been written out on a special piece of parchment in a special way by a sofer, a scribe. I was standing there in front of the 3 men. You need 3 people to make a Beit Din, 3 men in an
3
Orthodox
men.
Beit Din,
Right.
of course, and an Orthodox one. They were all quite lovely, I will say. They were really lovely. We went through the process, even though I will say, usually you can bring another woman with you so you feel better. But I was just like, I just want to get this over with. This is the last thing that I'm going to do in this marriage. This is it. I don't care. So I went. They go through the process. Part of it is the person representing your husband or your husband puts the scroll in your hand and you catch it and you bring it to yourself. You put it under your arm. You symbolize that you're taking it. And I remember doing quite a dramatic catch for comedic effect, and they all laughed. And this was just like such a great feeling. I'm like, yes, this is a weird ancient ritual, but we're all laughing about it, and I'm going to be free. So in the end, they take the get back from you, actually. They score it with a knife to make sure that nobody else can use this to divorce somebody else. You can't use this to bait and switch somebody else's wife. They keep it, and they give you a receipt. So no one can take that. And, yes, and that's in a
So it's an
safety deposit
official.
box. Yeah,
Right.
it's very official. It's very official. And that was sort of the end of that process. It took several months from our separation, 6 months. And that's short. Some women wait years. Some women wait forever. And that's the real scary part of this. I had it very, very easy. It was not a difficult process for me at all. But I know women who have been trapped because their husband will not give them the get at all.
And in your civil court process, you had agreement from him. And so that was the key to be able to get the get and to have an enforceable way to make sure that if he didn't do it, there would be contempt of court or some other consequence.
It's legally tricky because you can't compel somebody to give you a get, even though you should be able to compel them. But you have to be very careful on how you word it, which is why I made sure that the Beit Din was in communication with my lawyer so that everything was phrased appropriately. But that is exactly why the judge mentioned it during the civil divorce. And I felt like a sense of relief because I didn't feel like it's just me saying it. The judge is saying it.
Right.
The judge is saying it, and he should do it.
It's making me wonder, there have been times that I felt like there are all sorts of rituals in life for marriage, for death, for, somehow with divorce. I mean, court is sort of a ritual, but it's not really, it doesn't carry the same kind of social consequence, I guess. It seems not that it's private, it is public, but yet it's not something you invite people to. Neither is the Beit Din. But I guess what I'm wondering is whether or not either of them felt more or less healing, or somehow was the process something that had closure for you in a way that was better or worse?
This is a really great question. Even though legally speaking, the secular court, civil court was the end of the marriage.
Right.
I felt this cathartic moment more at the Beit Din, to be honest. Maybe it's because I knew I was so close to, it was like so close to freedom. This was the last thing, literally the last thing that I had to do. And also because in many ways, this was one of my biggest fears. And I was getting rid of that fear too. The fear of being trapped in that way. The fear of being looked at as his possession, in a sense. And this felt so right, even though it's just me and a group of men, and they're all up there and they're in their hats and their beards, and it's very intimidating in some ways, but also wasn't. They were quite nice to me, which is not always the case for every Batei Din. Again, go to ratemybabytoden.com. But I will say that afterwards, the rabbi took me aside and he said, "This is actually a good day for you. This is a great day. This is a day that you can actually celebrate. It's the first day of the rest of your life." And he was right. He was right. That really was the first day of the rest of my life. Now, he did caution me don't go out with any kohanim, which is priests in the Jewish tradition, because they can't marry a divorcee. And I was like, okay. But other than that, he was like, this is great. This is a great day for you.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a very cathartic moment. Even though I was completely secular, there's something so deeply Jewish in everything about me that it needed to happen. And it truly I felt elated when it was over.
And your description of like catching, catching the I don't know what the doctor
The get.
the get
Yes.
is called. But in scoring it, those kinds of things that are very visceral and physical, I think are elemental to rituals in general.
Yes.
So when you were describing that, it sort of felt to me like that was an interesting difference, I guess, to sort of like have that interaction with a court.
And I will say, it was not until years later when I got to the tractate in the Talmud all about divorce, years and years and years later, right, that I was like, oh, that's where all these things come from. They're talking about how to hand your the parchment to your wife. What happens? This is really a question, and I absolutely love them for asking this question. Well, what if she has a dog and the dog catches it? If she owns the dog, is that like handing it to her? Like, there's I'm like, what? If, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing.
Right.
They're having these discussions, and at the time, the Talmud was sort of put together. There was no need for the woman to accept that you divorced her, end of story. Later on in Jewish history, the woman had to accept, which I appreciate. But they're having all these conversations, all these interesting questions about how to have divorces, what that looks like, what you can and cannot do, what those rituals should and should not be, what is the symbolism here, what is the law, what are the parts of this that, and it just really gives you an idea of how rituals like this form. It wasn't entirely formed in the Talmud, but you see how it becomes, grows over time from the Talmudic conversations that I find so fascinating. So I was able to look back and be like, oh, that's why they do that. Oh, that's why they cut it with a knife. Oh, that's why they called me a million times to ask me every permutation of my name, because they have to make sure that it's me, 100% me, and this get can never be accidentally given to somebody else. All these things made sense because I started learning Talmud.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I also think you said something about, earlier about the aguna and people who just can never get that get.
Yes.
And also about how some things seem so current and some things are so ancient. And it makes me think about the fact that, in Massachusetts, legislation just passed this year on coercive control as a part of being able to gain a restraining order in court. That was a legitimate reason to be able to gain control. And I think that with the Aguna crisis, there's certainly a lot of manipulation and other things that go on. And these are not, it's sort of ecclesiastical in that sense. It's like the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Exactly.
And I think that's sort of a fascinating way that you contextualize things in your storytelling.
There is a story that I really love, and I love it because I love revenge stories. This is a fictional story. I should say this is a fictional story. And it was written 1,000 years ago. And there's various permutations of this story that pop up around the Jewish diaspora. So it has staying power. But briefly, and I have a video all about this, by the way, if anyone wants to watch
that would be
the video. It's called Jewish Law Reactions, Ride or Ashmedai, Parts 1 and Part 2. So it's adapted from this story called The Tale of the Jerusalemite. Or briefly, this Jewish man, has all these adventures and ends up accidentally in the realm of the demons, and who in Judaism are not like demons in Christianity. In fact, these demons spend all their time praying and worshiping God and learning Torah when they're not doing other demon stuff. Like, it's really fat. I could talk about this for a really long time. That's not what this podcast is about. But in the story, in order to gain power, this man marries Ashmedai, king of the demons, his daughter, the princess, right? And she loves him and they have a kid together. Well, what do you know? He already had a wife, a human wife, who he left as an aguna. Way back in the day, the word aguna referred to if your husband was lost at sea and you didn't know if they were alive or dead, right? Now it's more like that man doesn't want to give you a get and he just won't because he wants to extort you for money or whatever messed up coercive control thing he's doing.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the time of the story, really, in one sense, met somebody who had really, truly did not know what happened to their husband. So he's going on this adventure. He marries the daughter who deserves so much better. Her name is Ufrut, because we're going to name the women, right? Even when they're demon women, we name the women. And then he up and abandons her and their son and demands money from her. So she takes him to court, to the Beit Din. The demon princess takes her trash human husband to the Beit Din, and they vote in her favor. They rule in her favor. But he still won't do it. He still won't go along with it. He won't divorce her. He won't free her. So it ends by her strangling him to death. This again is fictional. Okay. But is it cathartic? Absolutely. And I'm thinking to myself, this story is 1,000 years old. And we're still struggling with this exact thing 1,000 years later. They were talking about it then, and we're still talking about it now. And unfortunately, we can't strangle people. That's not allowed because that's murder. But the point is, who is really the quote-unquote monster in that story? It's not the demon princess. It's the man who keeps his wife chained to him forever.
We can't keep you here all day, although I feel like there's so much I want to say. But I think either earlier in this conversation or before, you've talked a little bit about the interplay between science fiction and Talmud or Judaism. And I wanted you to just touch on that a bit because I think it's such a fascinating concept, analogy. And if you could take us there, I would be grateful.
Absolutely. In fact, I will give you another video that you can include if you would like.
Great.
So this is just an example. Yes, I am a massive nerd. I love sci-fi. I love fantasy. I often talk about the fact that when I was like 4 years old, my father, of blessed memory, read the Lord of the Rings to me and how formative that really was. And at the same time, I was forming my Jewish identity. So in my mind, that Venn diagram is just a circle. It's like Tolkien, Torah, it's a circle. So recently, we had the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, one of the Jewish New Years, and it fell on the, Gregorian calendar date, we would call it, is September the 22nd. And in The Lord of the Rings, that's a very important date. It's the birthday of Bilbo and Frodo Baggins. I just have to ask, are any of you Lord of the Rings?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I'm amongst my people. So what I did in honor of the fact that these two holidays overlapped, these two holidays of special magnificence overlapped that same day, is I made a video explaining Rosh Hashanah practices and traditions entirely in Tolkien terms. And it fits so well. Like I will just give an example. The idea of teshuvah, that is repentance or returning, and it's something that we're supposed to do right before the high holidays, right before Rosh Hashanah. We ask forgiveness for other people if we have done wrong by them. We also ask forgiveness as a community, right? And we try to make things right. And that is that's an idea that's perfectly embodied in the character of Boromir, right? So Boromir goes to this whole thing where he wants to take the ring. Sorry for any listeners who are not Lord of the Rings people. I'm sorry. Go read the books, come back after, and then keep playing this. But he wants to take the ring from Frodo in order to save his city, to save Minas Tirith. And that's not a bad thing. That's a fine thing. But the ring is also a perfect analogy for the idea of the Yetzer Hara in Judaism. That is the thing within each one of us. There's the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the bad influence and the good influence. Could be selfish influence instead of evil, depending on how you want to phrase it. But it's the thing that makes us make selfish choices. And maybe there's a good reason that we want to do it, but it definitely plays upon that and twists everything to be bad. So Boromir has listened to his Yetzer Hara, which is in fact the ring, and he tries to take it from Frodo. But then he has to do teshuvah. He asks for forgiveness. He sacrifices himself. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the books or movies. I don't know who that is. But spoiler alert, Boromir passes away because he's killed by orcs. He's sort of vindicated. He sort of knows that he has done wrong and tries to make amends by saving Merry and Pippin from the Uruk-hai before he passes away. And he also has his own personal shofar in the form of the Horn of Gondor. So that's just
Oh,
like a
funny.
little
Yes,
few
yes.
minutes
Right.
example
I
of
Right.
love
how
it.
these
That's
things can
great.
overlap.
That's great. I love
Yeah, no,
that.
absolutely. And one of the things that I've loved about this conversation and the work that you're doing, Miriam, is that it really demonstrates how you can take learning and teaching and ancient thoughts and ideas and information and have that be part of your own journey of self-discovery. And it seems like you've been on that journey really your whole life, from talking about 4 years old and learning about the Lord of the Rings, but also throughout the time when you were married and after, and figuring all of that out. And I imagine that a lot of the work that you're doing now in terms of your DAF reactionaries, podcast and videos really are helping other people find that information accessible and usable in their own lives. So how is that synergy, that connection working for you at this point in your very amazing story?
And very strange story. I'm the first person who knows it. It's been a weird journey, more like a quest. But I really,
Another reference to
exactly.
Right.
I'm just
Lord
a
of the Rings.
slightly younger Gandalf, right? I really, very few things make me happier than when someone tells me, often it's a woman, not always, but often it's a woman, tells me, maybe they send me this message privately, maybe they post it under a video in the comment section, but they say, I never thought I'd be able to learn this, but I just signed up for a Talmud course. Or I never thought I could do this. I never thought it was for me. I thought it was going to be boring, or I used to study it. And then this sometimes is more for men. I used to study it, but it wasn't interesting, but you've reignited my interest in it. And now they're getting something out of Talmud with a slightly different approach, because sometimes Talmud is taught in a way, historically, I think, that's very rote. At a certain point, it became calcified. And so
Mhm.
instead of this active debate and discussion that is so central in the Talmud itself, it became like so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that and da, 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 da. And there isn't enough room to actually feel things about what we're learning. It's okay to feel some type of way about what you're learning. If you're upset that a woman doesn't get a name, you're allowed to feel
Well,
something
it's
about that.
also sort of antithetical to the history that it would be calcified, and so you're taking it
Exactly.
forward, it's
Mm,
this is really a tradition
like
of
that.
discussion and, how you're doing it, and, that and the fact that for you, this journey has been one of such extraordinary growth, it seems, and that you did it on the heels of a really traumatic life experience and have been able to sort of, take I don't wanna use something, but I will, so hackneyed is, lemons to lemonade, but I think that you really have, really moved yourself in just incredible
Oh,
ways, and I can't thank you enough for not only
Mhm,
the conversation, but the amazing work that you're doing.
thank you for saying that, firstly. And secondly, lemons are my favorite food,
mhm.
actually, fun
Oh,
fact.
good.
So this works out well. It's just lemons to more lemons. Um, I would say this, when I started doing this, I didn't think anyone would ever see it. I had like 5 people tops. I was doing it so I would remember things better. And so I was going to do something really creative, but everybody was making videos. It was the pandemic. I didn't think anyone would see it. Maybe 5 other people who, like me, were, millennial women doing this for the first time, or just folks who were encountering it and trying to wrestle with it and figure out how to meet it as a modern person in an ancient text. Okay. I was like, okay, those folks
Mhm.
might like it. But it turned out to be so much more than that.
Mhm.
And what I can say is that yes, I was raised Jewish. Yes, I worked in Jewish nonprofits, because what else was I going to do with a degree from a Judaic studies degree? Nothing. Um, but the time that I have felt the most sense of Jewish community has been as this community grew around this content, both folks who are doing Daf Yomi, doing Talmud, who like my videos, who are finding inspiration in that and other amazing stuff folks are making online around Talmud and Jewish learning in a fun, reverent
Sure.
way,
Love that.
as I mentioned before, just who are taking a new approach to it and finding, how can I make this applicable to my life now? How can I make this learning personal? What can I take away from it that's going to change my life? And learning Talmud has changed my life so profoundly that I do not even remember the type of person that I was before I started doing this. I'm an introvert, okay? I'm a very shy introvert, but this has made me into something else.
Yeah, for
And
sure. I mean,
it's
your
given
presence is
me,
extraordinary.
thank you. It's given me a sense of ownership over my own life, my own choices, and my own expression of Judaism that I would not trade for the world.
Yeah, well, you can see it. I mean, you light up yourself, but you also lighting up the world with this. So,
Thank
I really, really want to thank you so much for sharing your worldviews with us and talking about this with us, and
Mhm.
to continue the conversation another time. If you ever
Yeah.
Absolutely.
mention
This
that,
was so fun.
it was
Yes, thank you. And one other question,
Yeah.
please, for people that want to find you online, that want to do
Yes.
the same kind of self um, directed learning that you've done in the Talmud, how can they find you?
You can find me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, Mastodon, and Threads. I think I got them all at Miriam Anzovin, Miriamanzovin. You can also search the hashtag Daf Reactions to pop up any of my content there. But also, if you want to learn, in addition to watching my videos, and I'm pleased you follow me online, but if you want to learn, I really recommend Sefaria. It is the best. I learn at Sefaria every single day. It's a phenomenal website. It's the digital library of all these Jewish texts, including the Talmud, and thus you will not have to purchase it. Sign up for the daily emails from my Jewish Learning. They have great summaries by incredible scholars like Dr. Sarah Ronis, who is absolutely one of my favorites. And if you can, find somebody to learn with, because learning with a chavruta, a study partner, is a traditional way of learning, but it's your friend, and you can have a lot of fun by doing it. And most important of all, whatever it might be, short form video is my way, but whatever form you have to express
that.
what you're feeling and learning, I encourage you to take up an artistic form of engaging with the text.
Love that. Do it and you remember it.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
love it.
Yeah. Well, Miriam, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today on our Thinking Boldly podcast. And we look forward to continuing the conversation soon, I hope.
Thank you. This was an absolute joy.
Same. Thank you so much.
Thank you.